Well, hello, y'all. It is time to breathe again on the latest Bofa Sports Shortie with Charles Taylor as your host. So, let's get into this interesting topic. And it's not necessarily about sports on the field as a whole. Don't worry, we will get to those topics coming up this week. We have the webcast, and I plan on having a blog article as well. But this is about the ever changing dynamics of the sports television landscape. As we know, everything is geared more toward streaming and networks, whether it's a Paramount Plus, ESPN Plus, whatever Plus, Peacock, of course, Hulu, Netflix, YouTube TV. There's just so many to name. And it is pretty tough on the television landscape, although television is probably the best way to still get live sports and catch all the games. It's forever changing and it's going to continue to change. But with all that in mind, you remember back a few weeks ago, and excuse me if I'm a little bit late to the game on this topic, but I've been following the topic, and I guess this is my way of telling you that I've been following what's been going on. But a few weeks ago, Fox Sports 1, they decided to cut three shows out of their daytime lineup. So the shows were Speak, that was hosted by Joy Taylor. We know Joy Taylor has some other things that was going on. She was accused of some things in a lawsuit. But that show was canceled, and so was the Facility, that was hosted by Emmanuel Acho and had a few other players, former players like Chase Daniel, LaShawn McCoy, who was on there too. And the Breakfast Ball. Breakfast Ball was canceled with Greg Carton, Danny Parkins, and those guys. So those three shows were canceled. So the only programs that are left on Fox Sports 1's daytime lineup is The Herd with Colin Cowherd and First Things First, which has Nick Wright as the main character. How I feel about those shows and a lot of the programming, that's not necessarily what this is about. That's another topic for another day because I'm not too pleased with those shows as it is. But that's what Fox Sports 1 has left. So to put in context what I'm about to say here, let's remember how Fox Sports 1 began. Fox Sports 1 was brought in to be basically the main competition to ESPN. We know ESPN, which stands for Entertainment, Sports, and Programming Network. That is the first network of its kind, the first one that was dedicated to sports and entertainment. When you're trying to come in and make a statement that says you can be better than whatever was there first, it probably does not help matters if you're trying to do the same thing that other network you're trying to defeat is if you're doing the same thing as that network, that's probably not going to work. You probably have to do something that's a little bit different, a little bit more off kilter from what people are used to seeing. So when Fox Sports 1 came into circulation, and I think this was around 2013, you had Fox Sports Live. So Fox Sports Live was supposed to be the answer or the equivalent to ESPN Sports Center. We know Fox Sports Live has long been gone from anybody's orbit. Well, I guess except mine because I can still remember. But you had a lot of people who came over from ESPN, from Skip Bayless. I mentioned Colin Cowherd, Clarissa Thompson, Aaron Andrews, just to name a few that have went over to FS1 to see if that station can get off the ground. And now, since you've gotten into this realm of trying to compete with ESPN, it doesn't look like it's working. It just appears ESPN is getting stronger. And back to that topic of doing the same thing the ESPN was doing. Remember, ESPN was in that whole embrace debate era. So the main show on there was First Take. Very funny that I mentioned First Take because that spun off of a program that ESPN had, and it was mostly on ESPN2. So if you remember Cold Pizza, there was a show on there named First and 10. First and 10 featured Skip Bayless on it, and most of the time, the guy who was on there with them is Woody Page. Woody Page is the longtime columnist of the Denver Post, the main newspaper and online publication in Denver, and also a mainstay on the show Around the Horn, which ended up closing its doors after a long run on ESPN. But of course, Skip Bayless was the main person on there. Stephen A. Smith came on for a few guest appearances on there, and him and Skip Bayless were going back and forth, yelling at each other, trying to decide who was louder than the other one. And that's how First Take came, because everybody was so, I guess, interested in those two debating. And ESPN just rode that momentum and decided to create a show off of it. But all that is to paint the picture of what ESPN was at that time when Skip Bayless left, and of course had the show Undisputed with Shannon Sharpe. And of course that show went away. Skip Bayless, I guess, tried to keep it going once Shannon Sharpe left and decided to go to ESPN. And yeah, guys like Keyshawn Johnson, Michael Irvin, Richard Sherman, who was on there too, and that show went away. All that is to paint the picture of FS1 and how this station had tried. It was supposed to be the answer to ESPN. It was supposed to be the station that was going to unseat ESPN as the top dog in sports entertainment. Of course, that has not happened, and it's just been a running of shows trying to find their niche, and they've just been canceled. You have two shows that are left on the live programming, and I really don't know what FS1 really does anymore. So I think, and I would love to hear y'all thoughts on this, but it might be time for FS1 to go. Period. Just in that experiment, it did not work. There was a lot of failed experiments within the main experiment, and it's probably time to go in another direction. If it wasn't for live sports, I don't know really what the purpose of FS1 would be. And when there isn't any live sports going on, it's just repeats of NASCAR events and games that were shown earlier on Fox. So I think it's probably time to at least reshuffle the deck with FS1, if not get rid of it altogether. Because when you're trying to knock a network off, you probably have to find your audience first, find your niche first, and then ultimately maybe you can compete for that top spot. But FS1 dove right in, and they made a mistake by trying to do basically the same thing ESPN was doing. And it did not work. It failed. And canceling 3 shows from your daytime lineup, I think that speaks volumes as to why this hasn't been able to happen. And also it speaks volumes to the direction. And of course they are making a whole bunch of money, so it really doesn't matter with a lot of these things as long as you're making a whole bunch of money. But if your hope was to try to take over from ESPN, that is not happening, not by a long shot. And it's probably time to reshuffle, if not just cancel FS1 altogether. Well, that is what I am breathing on for today. Y'all make sure y'all visit the Bofa Sports YouTube channel, smash that subscribe button, and follow the Bofa Sports Facebook page. Of course, there will be a webcast coming up on Tuesday evening. We hope you can join us for that. And in the meantime, stay up to date with everything that is coming. There's a lot going on, a lot of transition, but it's all good, and we cannot wait to tell you about it. So everybody take care. Have a great Monday. And we'll talk later on this week.